This is the Book of Mormon. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints say it's ancient scripture, and that it was translated by a guy named Joseph Smith. For years, people said there is no way he could have written it. It's 588 pages long and super complex. They said he wasn't smart enough. They said it had to have been written by someone else. Someone like Sidney Rigdon, who was this great historian, biblical scholar, and all-around accomplished academic. Or this dude, Solomon Spaulding, or, I don't know, some guy from Dartmouth University. Anyway, the reason people thought that Joseph couldn't have written it is because of the perception from his neighbors at the time. They said things like, he was a nondescript farm boy who was lazy and superstitious. You know, other people have at least given him a little bit more credit, like this historian who said, he was a gregarious, cheerful, imaginative youth, born to leadership but hampered by meager education and grinding poverty. I mean, the guy only had the equivalent of somewhere between a 3rd and 5th grade education. But you know what? The joke is on these people, because it turns out that writing the Book of Mormon is super easy when you're the greatest genius of our time. But you know what? Even super genius didn't do it all on his own. You can see here in this photo that he 100% loved books and liked to collect them. By the time he produced the Book of Mormon, Joseph had amassed an incredible collection of books. Here are just a few that he had collected and or borrowed. The Apocrypha, the Westminster Confession, the First Book of Napoleon, the Golden Pot, the Wonders of Nature and Providence Displayed, the Spaulding Manuscript, View of the Hebrews, History of Mexico, the Late War between the United States and Great Britain, the Bible, and just like a crap load of maps. So why maps, you might ask? Well, because genius obviously does have its limits. Joseph Smith was apparently horrible at inventing original names. He needed to come up with over 150 unique place names and over 200 character names. So that's why he had this extensive map collection. For example, a prominent church critic said the following about how he came up with the name Cumorah for the hill where the plates were supposedly found.
Off the eastern coast of Mozambique in Africa is an island country called Comoros. Prior to its French occupation in 1841, the islands were known by its Arabic name Comora. There is an 1808 map of Africa that refers to the islands as Comora.
You know, so obviously Joseph had that very special map in his incredible collection. But you know what? Lots of maps and books can only get you so far. As it turns out, Joseph Smith was also the luckiest guesser ever. Or, I don't know, maybe he had access to maps of the Arabian Peninsula even before they were published, which, I don't know, seems unlikely. Okay, so the reason I say that he was insanely lucky is because the route that Lehi and his family took in the Book of Mormon lines up perfectly with actual landmarks in the Arabian Peninsula. Here are just a few of those crazy lucky guesses that he made. Caves around Jerusalem. A valley called Wadi Tayyib al-Isim that matches the description of the Valley of Lemuel. A place that matches Nahum from the Book of Mormon and even has an altar with that name on it. Oh, and by the way, it's the only place in all of Arabia with that name. Oh, and it's right where it should be on Lehi's trail. Okay, so anyway, then Lehi and his family went east from Nahum and ran into actual freaking paradise. I don't know, you might even say it's an area filled with bounty. Oh, and trees. I mean, dude, look at this freaking tree. You could definitely build a sweet boat from trees like that. So yeah, super lucky. But you know what? He wasn't just a good guesser with Arabian Peninsula geography. This is a big list of all the things that Book of Mormon critics say never existed in the New World at the time of the Book of Mormon. They call them anachronisms, which is a fancy word that means good at guessing, I think. But being the clutch guesser that Joseph was, he also somehow knew that there would be discoveries later that updated these critiques. So in a way, you could say the Book of Mormon becomes more correct every year. That's pretty sweet if you ask me, and totally genius. Here's just one example of one of these anachronisms. For like years, people said, the Book of Mormon says they had horses, but there were no horses here in the New World until Christopher Columbus showed up. And the critics all laughed and were like, horses, LOL. But then just last year, some dudes dug up these dirt ponies, and so now the whole narrative is sunk. Never underestimate a freaking genius, guys. So anywho, back to Joseph's mad skills. When he wasn't farming, which was kind of an all-day affair, he was studying his incredible library by candlelight and planning his magnum opus, which is Spanish for sick book. And magnum it is, because the Book of Mormon is crazy complex. It has an intricate storyline with multiple merging histories of cultures and civilizations, and then like flashbacks, and then flashbacks within flashbacks, which is totally meta. You know, it features rich, detailed civilizations, all completely different from each other. It features a bunch of prophecies where a prophet in the book is like, hey, this thing is going to happen in like decades. And then later it happens in the book. It has hundreds of these prophecies in its pages that are all fulfilled later in the book with no loose ends. It features rich, complex allegories and symbolism that match up with ancient Hebrew customs. A few years ago, some researchers did this rad thing called word print analysis against all of the supposed writers in the book and found significant statistical differences in the style between each of the writers. So Joseph Smith was clearly amazing at writing, like in the styles of multiple people. The book describes realistic battles with intelligent strategy. It contains complex genealogies. Oh, and here's a cool complex thing. The Book of Mormon describes its own construction. It gives the list of the records that served as the quote-unquote source material, which were then compiled by various prophets in the book, and further edited by Moroni and Mormon into the gold plates, which were then quote-unquote translated. By the way, talk about genius. When Joseph Smith quote-unquote translated the Book of Mormon, the process consisted of him dictating to somebody else. He called him a scribe, right? So once the dictation was done, it went straight to the printer without being edited. Man, that is some clutch genius badassery right there. Oh, and the dictation only took 57 to 63 days. Oh, and check this out. According to witnesses, after they took a break from dictating, Joseph would pick right back up where he left off. So I can kind of think of maybe a couple smart boy explanations for all this. So you know how he had a hat that he put his face into, right? I'm thinking that he had a hole in the hat and then like some tiny notes stuck to his shoe with like, I don't know, beeswax or like goose juice or something. Anyway, he'd look in the hat and his gaze was all like, doop, 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 and he'd just read from his sneaky note. Oh, no. Or maybe this. Maybe he didn't need notes. Okay. He had a photographic memory. He wrote the whole book down and then memorized it. So yeah, forget about the whole shoe hat thing. That was dumb. I'm sorry. He was just amazing as usual. But wait, hold on a second. Maybe he did have notes. And maybe he didn't need photographic memory, which has never been proven to exist. So that brings me to the next amazing thing about Mr. Smith. He was probably a pretty great hypnotist. He just hypnotized people to think that he didn't have sneaky notes. Yeah. So yeah, I take it back. He definitely maybe did the shoe note thing, possibly. Also, using his stupendous hypnotism skills, he probably just hypnotized 18 people to believe they actually saw or felt gold plates and or met an angel. Also, his hypnotism was so good that 6 of them believed they saw these things even after they left the church. 2 of the ones who left came back, but 4 never did. And not a single one of these 18 people ever denied what they saw. Some even professed the same on their deathbed. So powerful. Anyway, about the book, modern scholars continue to find amazing complexity in its pages. Like, did you know that the Book of Mormon has thousands of what really smart people call Hebraisms, which is a fancy word for ways of writing that are consistent with the styles and customs of the ancient Jews? So freaking genius. I mean, holy moly. Like I said before, Joseph was the greatest genius of our time. And what did he use all that genius for? Filling the Book of Mormon with sophisticated doctrinal sermons and testifying of Jesus Christ. The fact of the matter is that to believe that Joseph Smith was this level of genius takes faith. It takes a lot of faith to believe that some barely educated farm dude was actually a literary genius, a peerless theologian, a connoisseur of books and maps, an ancient Hebrew scholar, an expert hypnotist, and military strategist with a photographic memory who was insanely lucky and or a time traveler. Or, I don't know, maybe he was just a farm dude, and it went down exactly like he said. He got some plates and translated them by the power of God. But that's just too ridiculous, right? Right?